angels versus venture. We're going on to our third slide here and our third topic.
Yeah. So when we're looking at additional sources of capital, should a founder focus on angels or VC firms, venture capital firms? And what are the pluses and minuses of them?
Yeah, so I think typically the way to decide who you would focus on for a particular raise would be to start with how much are you trying to raise. So typically we see if an amount is less than, $1 million or so, that tends to lend itself more towards angel investors that write smaller checks. And then over $1 million, you typically find yourself in what most people would call institutional capital, which would be VC, venture capital. And so thinking about kind of the pluses and minuses about both of them, typically angels are going to invest much faster, make faster decisions because there's only one of them. There's no team behind them that has to help make that decision. And then with VCs versus angels, one of the pluses about having a VC is typically they're going to be more helpful. That's not always the case, but an angel is oftentimes has a full-time job. Working at a company, perhaps running their own, or working has a senior position in a larger company, and so the amount of time that they can help with, perhaps the amount of experience they have with the specific startup is less, and so
is there a minimum check size you should give? Because I get this question a lot. What are your thoughts on minimum check sizes for angels and how to manage that? Let's say in this scenario you're raising your $700,000 seed angel round.
Yeah.
What would you set the minimum at and why?
Yeah. So
why are there minimums?
Sure. So cap table management is really the factor here. So as your company progresses, there's going to be times where you need to collect signatures. Perhaps there's a large influx of a large capital raise that you need to do to go back and get permission from all of your smaller investors on. Perhaps there's a date that a note or a safe was supposed to come due, and so you need to again get that change, and so you have to go back and get signatures. So in general, you want to try to keep the amount of folks actually on your cap table to a minimum, and so that's typically why you would ask for a minimum check. And then it depends. I think the most common number is probably around $50K, sometimes as low as $25K.
Yeah.
And then as the round increases, you would typically see that higher. And then a lot of times the question that founders will ask is, how valuable is this individual? How much, what beyond the cash can they help with the company? And that typically helps decide whether or not they earn their spot on the cap table.
And collecting signatures can be arduous, Ashley.
It certainly can. Yes.
Considering it's a large portion of what you do is collect signatures for the syndicate, which we're going to get to later. But at this stage, what are your thoughts on seed funds versus venture funds? Because this is also something that's sort of a difference. We have this new emergence of $10 to $100 million funds. Do they act quicker in our experience? Do they have a different process than venture funds?
I mean, diligence might be a little bit less.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still formal funding.
Yeah.
The check size sure is smaller, but typically the fund size overall is smaller. So percentage is probably fairly similar. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's, you would think that with a smaller fund, that the decision and the decision would be faster, diligence would be less. It doesn't seem to be that common, actually. It seems like the processes seem pretty similar. The amount of time it takes to make a decision seems pretty similar. We've had a number of companies that have recently kind of gone both routes, and it seems like those decisions and processes are pretty similar. Not unfortunate that we would hope that someone more nimble and smaller would be able to act faster, but doesn't seem to be the case actually very much.
Yeah.
Have you seen?
I would say seed funds tend to have 2 or 3 partners, mm-hmm. whereas a venture firm might have double that or triple it. They might have 6. And so I have seen seed funds maybe be able to act a little quicker because if you only have to, if Satya and Hunter from Homebrew, just picking an example of I think they were a $60 million fund. They might be 120 now. I think they may have added 1 or 2 more partners. But in the early days, maybe they could just write a check very quickly because they just have to text each other or make one phone call to each other and say, hey, you cool with this or not? As opposed to the Monday morning meeting at a seed fund or a venture fund where you have to sort of build consensus. And then picking VCs to target. How do we advise people to pick people to target? Who should I get an introduction to? Who should I try to pitch my business to?
I mean, taking a look at their portfolio is a great start. I think just getting to know, it's hard to get to know someone on social, but sort of following different VCs and getting to know how they operate. I mean, you're going to be in business with this person for quite some time. So you have to like the person. You have to want to be in business with them.
Right. And vice versa.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Demont deals with this a lot more than I do since he's went during his pipeline and getting feedback from founders. But
yeah, I think to Ashley's point, looking at the portfolio, seeing that they have an interest in your space but have not invested in a competitor is typically kind of the first part.
Okay, so they are interested. Let's say I had an app that was a consumer app, and it was for mindfulness or something, meditation, mindfulness, journaling, whatever. So in this case, what would I look for in a venture firm for, let's call it like my Calm.com competitor?
Yep. So first, make sure that they haven't invested in a Calm or a Headspace or something that. The question that I would typically ask a founder when they're looking at a portfolio is, if the reverse situation happened, if they invested in you first and then the VC came to them and asked, can we invest in this company? How would you feel about that?
Right.
And if you wouldn't feel comfortable, then the reverse doesn't make sense.
Right. So they've invested in Headspace or Calm. You're likely not to invest
That's right.
in you. So you can kind of eliminate them from the pool.
Yeah. But let's say they've invested in maybe some sort of exercise company. So that clearly says that, they're into, let's say, wellness as a general category.
They invested in Peloton or ClassPass.
Yep. Two good examples, but they don't have kind of the presence, the meditation app. That would be a good example of they're clearly interested in the general space, and so potentially a good target for this particular app.
Okay, and are we going to go to syndicates later in the deck, or should we address that now?
we can address it now.
Let's address it now, syndicates, because this is something that we do at jasonsyndicate.com, and we've done 96 of those, and Ashley, you're the managing director of the syndicate. Let's do, aside from putting angels aside right now, and just say venture capital / seed funds versus a syndicate. How are they different?
So they're different in that the amount can be flexible. We're not typically, as a syndicate, we're not typically looking for the, setting the terms and looking for that same target ownership as a VC would. But and sort of back to Demont's point about angels maybe not being as helpful because they have full-time jobs. A syndicate is, up to 250 accredited investors that, maybe they have full-time jobs also, and most of them do, but there's 250 of them.
Right.
And so we're not just investing funds, we're not investing anywhere from 100K to 2.4 million just to be on the cap table. We're also supercharging that investment with a bunch of really knowledgeable accredited investors who will help with marketing for the company. Our customers will help with hiring, just have different expertise that they can share with the founders. And I mean, not to knock a seed fund or a VC, but they don't typically have that volume. They have a significant network, but they don't have the, that volume of, 250 people that are not just financially invested in the company, but are really truly interested. They're opting in to invest in this. We're not, we don't make anyone, we don't set a minimum number of deals they have to invest in per year. They get to invest only in what they're extremely excited about.
And what's the average number of participants? What would the median be? Because I know just off the top of my head, we had a couple that got into that 250 range, 200 range. And then I've seen as low as 50 or 60. Yeah. What's our median, would you say? 80. So you have 80 people. Now, does this mean I've got to chase 80 signatures?
That's a great question, Jason. No, you do not have to chase 80 signatures. That's a great point. So you have all of this power behind, and brain power behind it, but you only need one signature, and that signature is of the lead of the syndicate. In our case, it's mainly Jason, of course. But you don't have to chase all of these investors to approve a new round, to approve an increase in shares, to when you go to do your pro rata round. It's not everyone opting in all at once. It's saying, the lead saying, yes, we want to do this, or no, we don't. You don't have to get general consensus.
So one item on the cap table.
One item on the cap table.
But 80 participants.
Mm-hmm.
How do, if you complete a syndicate, at least with our syndicate, how does the founder tap in to those 80 people? Do they get their email addresses? Do they have to do a phone call with all 80 to raise money? Take us through a little bit of the mechanics there.
Yeah, so to meet them, we being Launch, we work with the founder to create a deal memo that really describes their company in a sort of basic way. And then we give a link to a webinar. So when we send that deal memo out, it's just a quick, trailer of their company. And then if that's of interest, the investors can then attend the webinar or even reach out to the founder directly and get more questions answered to do their own sort of due diligence, get their take on the health of the company. And then once, so of course, if the investor reaches out directly to the founder that way, they have their contact information. But at that time, that investor really is opted in to sharing that information by reaching out.
Yeah.
Once we close the deal of those 80 investors who opt in, we keep them anonymous unless they want to not be. So the way we do that is we just include them on one group, a listserv that the founder then adds to their update list. And if they want to respond when the founder sends that update, they can. We always recommend that a founder immediately after closing sends a welcome letter to all the syndicate members saying, thank you so much for investing. This is a little bit more background about my company. Hey, introduce yourself. Is there anything you can help us with? This is we're hiring, or this is what we need help with. And the investors who want to be known and want to be helpful will reach out at that point. But there's absolutely no obligation to do so. And you can do it passively if that's, sort of your investment thesis.
One of the interesting things that I'd never anticipated when we started syndicating 5 years ago was the Com deal, the first one.
Almost 5 years ago.
Almost 5 years ago, we did Com.com, our first deal, which is
April 17th.
April 17th. Oh, wow. Right around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
I have to have a party. And obviously, that was a $5 million valuation, and the company recently announced a $1 billion valuation. So it's the most successful syndicate done in the history of syndicates, whether it's Seed Invest, Republic, AngelList, or Funders Club, or any of them.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I never anticipated was that a syndicate member might put $50K into a deal or $25K into a deal, and then eventually lead the next round. And we had that happen with one company, which was a cannabis company, Kush Marketplace, where one of our syndicate members maybe made a small check or a medium-sized check and then said, I love this company so much. I've been spending time with them. Would it be okay if we led the next round? And we said, yeah, I think that's okay. And so I always encourage people when they're dealing with accredited investors to understand that they might only be putting in a 2K or a 5K or a 10K check from syndicate, whether it's on AngelList or ours, but they then might, in a future round, add a 0 or 2 to that number, or 3, because they're accredited.